story of our changing world. How things began to change. In this chapter, we are going on a grand adventure through time. We are going to discover how the world started to look a bit more like it does today. It's all about three very big things: new countries, how people came together to start their own special nations; clever inventions, how humans use their thinking caps to create new technology and better ways of doing things; growing cities, how small villages turned into bustling, busy towns where lots of people lived and worked together. A little look at the picture. The drawing shows people from a long time ago traveling with camels and horses. It reminds us that before we had fast cars or airplanes, people went on jolly long journeys to trade things and visit faraway lands. Top tip for young historians: history is like a giant jigsaw puzzle. Every new invention and every new city is a piece that helps us understand how we got to where we are today. Would you like to hear more about the clever inventions from this time, or shall we talk about the brave explorers on their travels? What we are going to learn. In this lesson, we are stepping back into the Middle Ages. We're going to find out how people lived together in a feudal society. That sounds like a fancy word, but it just means a way of organizing who was in charge and how everyone helped one another. We will explore life in the manor, how people worked on big farms and lived in cozy little villages. Special rules, how kings, lords, and workers all had their own important jobs to do. Ancient traditions, how families grew their food and shared what they had. A busy day at the village. If you look at the lovely pictures, you can see how people lived in groups of round houses. Back then, there weren't any supermarkets. Everyone worked very hard outside. Growing food, most people were farmers who spent their days planting crops and looking after animals. Staying together. Because life could be a bit tricky, families lived close together inside wooden fences to keep everyone safe and sound. Simple homes. Their houses were made from wood and straw, often with a nice fire in the middle to keep everyone warm during those chilly British winters. As time went on, these small groups of people started to join together. This is how the big countries we know today first began to grow. People started to think of themselves not just as villagers, but as part of a much bigger family called a nation. It was the start of a whole new chapter in history, where people began to build even bigger towns, create clever new tools, and trade with neighbors from far away. Did you know? In a manor, the person in charge was like the head teacher of a really big school. They made sure everyone followed the rules and had a place to live. Would you like to know what kind of food these villagers ate, or shall we talk about the brave knights who lived during this time? Trading across the map. The Grand Connection. Long ago, people lived in their own little corners of the world, but eventually, they started to get curious. They began to travel far and wide, across vast oceans and sandy deserts, to meet people from different lands. This was a very busy time because the Silk Road and sea roads. People found clever new ways to travel from the east to the west. They carried shiny jewels, colorful silks, and yummy spices that no one had ever tasted before. The Crusades. There were some very famous battles called the Crusades. While these were tough times, they actually helped people from different cultures share new ideas and inventions once the fighting stopped. The rise of the townsfolk. As more people started buying and selling cool things, small villages began to grow into big, bustling cities. A new group of people appeared called the middle class, or the bourgeoisie. These weren't kings or knights. They were shopkeepers, traders, and craftspeople. The birth of the Borg. In many places, a Borg was a protected town with strong walls. The people living there were called burghers. Clever guilds. To make sure everyone did a top-notch job, workers formed special clubs called guilds. If you were a baker or a blacksmith, your guild made sure your work was the best it could be. Kings and new nations. While the towns were getting busier, the way countries were run started to change too. Instead of lots of little lords arguing over small bits of land, powerful national monarchs, grand kings and queens, started to bring everyone together under one flag. People started to feel very proud of their own countries. They began to speak the same languages and follow the same laws. Modern times! This was the very beginning of the modern world we live in today, where big countries work together and trade items from all over the globe. A note for explorers. Imagine if you had never tasted pepper or seen a piece of silk. Trading didn't just bring new stuff, it brought new stories, new music, and new ways of thinking to everyone's front door. Would you like to hear about the specific treasures they traded, like cinnamon and gold? Or shall we talk about what life was like inside a walled city? A Grand Journey Through History, pages 66 and 67. The Map of Modern Friends. On page 66, we see a map of Europe. During this time, the world was changing from a collection of small villages into the big, strong countries we recognize today, like England, France, and Spain. These became known as nation-states. Instead of everyone following different local rules, they all came together under one flag and one king or queen. It was the start of people feeling very proud of their own home countries. What a brilliant way to unite! The Great Rebirth, the Renaissance. Moving over to page 67, we learn about the Renaissance. This is a special word that means starting fresh. After a long time of doing things the old-fashioned way, people suddenly became very curious about everything. They started reading old books from Greece and Rome and began asking, how does the world actually work? The pictures on this page show some very famous thinkers who used their noddles to change the world. Galileo and the telescope. He looked up at the night sky and discovered that the Earth moves around the sun. People used to think the Earth stayed still, so this was a mind-boggling discovery. The printing press. This was perhaps the most important invention of all. Before this, books were written by hand and cost a fortune. Now, books could be made quickly, meaning children and grown-ups everywhere could finally learn to read. Art and medicine. Artists started painting beautiful, realistic pictures, and doctors began to understand how the human body stays healthy and strong. Summary of the big ideas. New nations, people joined together to form the countries we know today. Smart science, explorers and scientists used telescopes and new tools to study the stars and the sea. Sharing stories. Thanks to printed books, new ideas spread across the land faster than a racing pony. A quick history secret. Without the clever inventions on these pages, we might not have the books, computers, or even the maps we use today. These people were the world's first tech wizards. Would you like to hear more about how they used those old-fashioned telescopes? Or shall we talk about the brave sailors who used these new maps to find new worlds? Power from Nature and the Stars, pages 68 and 69. Brilliant machines that use the wind and water. On page 68, we see some very clever inventions. Before electricity was invented, people had to be very resourceful. They used the world around them to do the heavy lifting. The windmill. These giant spinning fans use the breeze to grind grain into flour for bread. It's like a giant kitchen gadget powered by the sky. The water wheel. By placing a big wheel in a splashing river, people used the power of flowing water to run machinery. It was green energy hundreds of years ago. The telescope. Look at that long tube. This allowed explorers to see far-off lands and sailors to navigate by the stars. It made the big wide world feel just a little bit smaller. The big aha moments. On page 69, we have a summary of all the eureka moments that changed history. These are the top-notch facts every young historian should know. The meaning of Renaissance. Remember, this word just means a fresh start for art, science, and learning. Stargazers.
Clever people like Copernicus and Galileo proved that our Earth is just one part of a much bigger solar system.
Exploring the blue. Because of new tools like the compass and better telescopes, brave sailors were able to cross the oceans to find new continents like the Americas. The growth of Italy. Many of these exciting changes started in Italy, where busy port cities became the shopping malls of the world, full of art and new ideas. Why does this matter to us?
Because of these explorers, people started sharing food and stories from all over the globe. Stronger nations. Countries started working together, creating the map of the world we see today. The power of thinking. This era showed that if you ask why and how, you can invent something that changes the world forever. A little British cheer.
We can be very thankful for these old-fashioned inventors. Without their water wheels and telescopes, we might never have figured out how to build the fast cars and amazing computers we have today. Would you like to learn about the brave captains who sailed those first ships across the ocean? Or shall we look at the secret ways they used wind to make their bread? The Boot-Shaped Land of Ideas, pages 70 and 71. The map of magnificent Italy. On page 70, we see a map of Italy. This country is famous for being shaped like a giant boot. During the Renaissance, Italy was the place to be. It wasn't just one big country yet. It was made of several busy city-states like Florence, Venice, and Rome, the center of the world. Because Italy is right in the middle of the sea, it became the perfect spot for ships to stop and trade.
Wealthy cities like Venice, became really rich by selling silk and spices. Because they had extra money, they could pay artists and scientists to create amazing things. A bit of a muddle. Unlike England or France, these Italian cities often argued with each other. Because they weren't united, sometimes other countries would try to push them around. Test your history brain.
On page 71, we have a fun quiz to see how much you've learned on our journey. Here are the big ideas you need to remember to ace the questions. The Crusades. These were big battles that happened between 1095 and 1291. Even though they were wars, they helped people from the East and West meet and trade. Renaissance. Remember, this means rebirth. It started in the Italian city-states. National monarchs. These were the grand kings and queens who brought people together to make strong nations. Feudalism. This was the old way of living on big farms called manors, where everyone had a specific job to do for the lord of the land. Guilds. These were the special clubs for clever workers and craftsmen in the new towns. A fancy name for the middle class. The shopkeepers and traders who lived in towns called bourgs. Summary of our lessons. We learned how people moved from quiet farms to busy, bustling towns. We saw how new inventions like telescopes and windmills changed how we work and see the stars. We discovered how countries like Britain and France became united and strong. And we finished in Italy, where the rebirth of art and science truly began. A final word for young Britons. Learning about the past is like having a secret map of the future. By seeing how these people solved problems and invented new things, you can get inspired to be the next great inventor or explorer. You've done a smashing job following along. Is there any part of the quiz on page 71 you'd like some help with? Or shall we look back at our favorite invention? Putting our thinking caps on, pages 72 and 73. The Grand History Quiz. On page 72, we have some fun fill-in-the-blanks and true or false questions to see how much of a history whiz you've become. Here is a kid-friendly look at what the book is asking. The Stargazers? It asks about Copernicus and Galileo. Remember, they were the brave souls who used telescopes to show us that the Earth dances around the sun. Trade and travel. There are questions about how explorers traveled to places like Asia and America to bring back wonderful treasures. The Italian cities. It mentions how places like Venice were the kings of the sea, helping everyone trade their goods.
True or false? The book asks if things like the Crusades changed the world. True. And if the Renaissance brought new ideas to life. Absolutely true. Big questions and brilliant answers. On page 73, we dive into the why and how of history. These are the short answer questions that help us tell the story. Who lived on the farms? Long ago, the land was divided into manors. The workers, called serfs, looked after the crops, while the lords stayed in the big houses. It was a very busy way of life. The nightly battles. It asks about the years the Crusades happened, 1095 to 1291. These were famous times when knights from Europe traveled far away. The new middle class. As towns grew, people who weren't just farmers or lords appeared. These were the merchants and shopkeepers who made the cities tick. The birth of cities. How did those old towns start? They grew in places where people could easily meet to buy and sell things, especially near the water. A little history secret for you. Did you know? Most of the words we use for true or false in this book are like a secret code. By checking your answers, you're basically becoming a history detective, solving the mystery of how our modern world was built. Let's finish with a flourish. Fact 1. People used to think the Earth was flat, but explorers proved it was a giant, beautiful ball. Fact 2. The middle class is the reason we have so many lovely shops and markets today. Fact 3. Learning history is top-notch because it reminds us that humans are always finding clever ways to make life better. You've done a bang-up job going through these pages. Would you like to go back and check any of the answers together, or are you ready for a new adventure? Checking our facts. On page 74, we are finishing up our list of clever questions. It's like a fountain of knowledge where we make sure we remember the most important bits of our story. The captains of the ship. Who led the way in bringing everyone together? It was the national monarchs, the kings and queens, who helped people feel united. A French word for a fresh start. Do you remember what Renaissance means? It's a French word that means rebirth. It was a time when art and science were born again in a brilliant new way. Starry discoveries. We give a big 3 cheers for Nicholas Copernicus and Galileo Galilei. They were the ones who realized the sun is the center of our neighborhood in space. Brave sailors. In the 14th century, European explorers started sailing across the deep blue sea to find new lands and treasures. The fashion capital. The city of Milan was famous for making the very best clothes and shiny armor. It was the place to be for high-quality crafts. The grand story summaries. On page 75, we look at the big picture of how the world changed from the olden days to the modern world. Here is the scoop. How the Crusades changed things. These big adventures and battles actually helped people trade more. Because of these journeys, new towns popped up, and people started using coins and money instead of just swapping things. It was the start of the middle class. The secret clubs, guilds. In the busy new cities, workers formed guilds. Think of them like a team captain's club for bakers, weavers, and smiths. They made sure everyone did a top-notch job and looked after one another. The end of the old farm life. For a long time, the feudal system meant everyone lived on big farms called manors. But as towns grew and people started trading with neighbors far away, that old way of living slowly fizzled out to make room for our modern world. A jolly good job. Top tip for Bright Sparks? History isn't just a list of dates. It's the story of how people like you and me decided to be brave, ask questions, and build a better world together. You finished the whole chapter. You are officially a history hero. Should we go back and pick our favorite explorer, or are you ready to close the book for today? Pages 76 and 77, The Big Picture of History. How Nations Found Their Feet. On page 76, we take a deep dive into how modern countries were born. It wasn't just magic, it happened because of some very big changes. The power of trade. As merchants got richer from selling spices and silks, they wanted a peaceful world to do business in. They supported strong kings and queens to keep things shipshape and orderly. A shared feeling. People began to realize they shared the same language and traditions. Instead of just belonging to a tiny village, they felt proud to be part of a big nation-state, like England or France. The end of the old ways. The old feudal system, where everyone worked on one big farm, started to fade away as people moved to bustling cities to find new opportunities. The magic of the Renaissance. Turning over to page 77, we look at why this time was so brilliant. It was an era where everyone put their thinking caps on. Learning for everyone. Huge schools called universities, nearly 80 of them, popped up all over Europe. People studied everything from art to medicine. The printing press revolution. This was the internet of the 1400s. Because books could be printed quickly, ideas spread like wildfire. If someone had a clever thought in Italy, someone in Britain could read about it just a few weeks later. Science and the stars. We see our friends Copernicus and Galileo again. They used their noddles to prove that the Earth wasn't the center of the universe. This changed how humans saw their place in the giant, sparkly galaxy. Clever new tools, inventions like better compasses and sturdier ships, allowed sailors to go on jolly long journeys across the Atlantic and Indian Oceans. They weren't just guessing where they were going anymore, they were using science. The bottom of page 77 explains why Italy was so special. Location, location, location. Because Italy is right in the middle of the Mediterranean Sea, it was the perfect pit stop for traders from the East and West. City power. Cities like Florence, Venice, and Milan became world famous for making incredible things, from shiny silk to the strongest steel armor. A quick summary for young explorers. The secret ingredient. The most important thing that happened on these pages wasn't just a war or a king, it was curiosity. People stopped doing things because that's how we've always done it, and started asking, how can we do this better? You've done a smashing job getting through these heavy pages. Would you like to know more about the secret inventions the sailors used? Or shall we talk about what it was like to study at one of those very first universities? On page 78, we see a brilliant mind map. It's like a family tree, but for history. It shows how all the different pieces of the puzzle fit together to change the world. Here is how to read it. The big change. At the very top, we see the transformation of Europe. This was the moment the world decided to grow up and try new things. 3 main branches. New countries. How kings and queens brought people together to create the nations we know today. The Renaissance. That wonderful rebirth of art, science, and smart thinking. The rise of cities, how tiny villages turned into busy, bustling towns, full of shops and traders. Underneath, you can see how things like the Crusades, new inventions like the telescope, and Italian city-states all helped these big branches grow strong. Where did the stories come from? On page 79, the book shares its secret sources. Just like a detective needs clues, historians need books to find out the truth about the past. Photo credits? The book lists where it found those lovely pictures of Galileo's telescope, the windmills, and the old maps. It's important to give credit to the clever people who saved these treasures for us to see. Grand references. It lists famous history books from places like London and Oxford. These are the big, thick books that experts use to make sure every fact we learn is spot on. A jolly good conclusion. The lessons end. You've reached the final pages of this chapter. You now know how explorers, scientists, and traders work together to build the modern world. You've seen how one clever idea, like a printing press or a telescope, can change the world for everyone. Well done, Little Britain. You've finished the whole lesson with flying colors. You've learned about
brave knights and grand castles, busy markets and clever guilds, scientists who looked at the stars, and how countries became one big family. Would you like to start a brand new adventure in the next chapter, or shall we have one last look at your favorite invention from this journey?